Yeah, so we're just going through the Inyanim. Let's just recap from Perik Yud Gimel. What was the Yisodis that came out of Perik Yud Gimel? Let's again put things into the context. Where are we going with this? We're coming up actually to Shlach, which is a very important shlav in the Hemshech. But it's all leading up from when he started, if you remember, in Perik Zayin, I think it was Perik Zayin, where he said, where the Rebbe Shossein said that just like in the Kovetz and Nefesh, the Kovetz Apnimi Be'etzem, the same thing L'mayla. Well, the Hoven Zer, he launched into the whole thing of Atzilus, is it Be'ein HaRoich, or is it Gilei HaHelam? So at the beginning we wanted to say that Atzilus is Yesh Mi'ayin, is going on the Kalim, and the Oiris are Gilei HaHelam. Right? But then he asked the question at the beginning of this Maamar, that from the Loshen HaKosuf, V'achochma me'ayin timotza, it doesn't say V'kli ha'chochma me'ayin timotza. Theoretically, it could say something like that in the Pasuk. It says V'achochma me'ayin timotza, which would mean that Klovas ha'chochma is me'ayin timotza. That means even the Oir of Chochma also has an inyan of Be'ein HaRoich. So what is that inyan of Be'ein HaRoich? So last time we discussed the first part of the Maamar. What's happening over here is that Rebbe Shossein is showing us, as particularly started in the last Perik, in Perik Yud Gimel, that there's actually, if we're going to decide if the Oiris have its seal or not, the decision in this Hemshech over here is that the Oiris themselves do have its seal, and yet at the same time the Oiris pshutim. And we said, La Fuke, for example, the shit of the Pardes that holds the moshel of Mayim in a Kli Zchuchis, that Mayim are pshutim even when they're inside the Kli. We're saying not like that. And that was the moshel of the Achlifa Duchtayu, that when the Svara comes out from Shmai V'Avtalion, and Hillel and Shammai take the Svara, each one the Fishitosai, when they take the Svara actually changes. It changes and it becomes Gvura. When it's in the mind of Shammai, B'derech Klal is Machmeh. When it's in the mind of Shammai, the Svara is Mechayev L'Chumra. And when it's in the mind of Hillel, the Svara is Mechayev L'Kula. The fact that it can change shows us that there's Pshitus in the Sfaras Harav by the Rav. But when it comes down, this is the first of the three things which is Madgish in the Hamuvim Mizeh, at the end of Perik Yud Gimel, that when it comes down, it does change. It is now an Oir HaChesed, it's now an Oir HaGvura. At the same time, we have to say, this Gvura and Chesed, which comes out when it's Mislabish in the Kli, are they being Mechadish a Chesed and Gvura in the Oir? They're not Mechadish a Chesed and Gvura in the Oir, because you have to say that even by the Rav, before it came down to the Talmud, before it came down to Hillel and Shammai, it was koilel both days. So there's a shtickle, sensitive shtickle over here. But we're talking about the Oiris before they came down. Is there Chesed and Gvura in the Oiris? How are we going to be magdir the Oir before it came down? Is there Chesed and Gvura in the Kli or not? There is Chesed and Gvura. So what changed when it came down into Hillel and Shammai? What happened?
The Chachma was nifed, the Chesed was nifed from the Gvura and became more dominant. So the Gvura was.
So, but in the mind of Hillel, for example, it's Kula L'Kula, and in the mind of Shammai, it's Kula L'Chumra. In the Oir, before it came down, we say it's Pshitas. V'haraya could be Achlifu Dochtayu. Well, they can come back and change their minds and go the opposite. So how we magdir the Chesed and Gvura in the Pshitas before it came down? So the Loshen the Maamar, just to make it clearer, I think it's this page, or is it the next page? He says that when it comes, the Chesed and Gvura that's in the Moker is Behelam. There is Chesed and Gvura, but it's Behelam. And the Keli, they look at the end of the. You look at the Kitzah Akapon, look at the Kitzah of Perik Yud Gimel, you see it over there. It's also in the Pnim somewhere.
The end of page Ches.
Yes, the last line of Perek Chav Ches of the new print. It says, yes, Yeshu v'chinas chesed gvura behelem, rak shu v'chinas pshitus legabe seichel v'asagus hamakablim. So there is chesed and gvura there, but it's pshitus. So what does the kli do? The kli draws out a certain seer that's there behelem and now makes it begilui. That's why when it comes into the mind of Shammai, he only sees one side, because he was megala the tzad ha-gvura shebazeh, and Hillel was megala the tzad ha-chesed shebazeh. So there is chesed and gvura behelem, and that's why the Kedi can change it. So you see where we're going here with the inyan of Pnimim Be'etzem? Pnimim Be'etzem means it's Be'etzem, it has these inyanim, it does have chesed and gvura. Just like the koiches, we say, before they came into the guf, there's chokhmah of the neshama. When it comes into the guf makes it a gashmistic chokhmah. So now he only understands gashmis, he doesn't understand a lakus like he understood before the slapshes in the guf. But he's not mechadish chokhmah in the neshama. The neshama had chokhmah beforehand, he's megash in it. He brings out the tzir that's there already. Al derech zebinyanenu, the tzir in the oil was already there beforehand, but it was behelem. And the kli brings it out begilui.
This beer only makes a general seer of all the areas together.
Say again?
This beer only gives a general seer of all the areas together. It's not like oil, which is going to Chachma, has a seer back into Chachma, that's Minas Bina. Every oil, they all have really and
good, so that's very good. And look at this Perek Yudalad now, where we're getting to now. Here you see that he's concentrating only on one sphere. He's showing you from Achlifu Duchtayu that Lagabe the Kli, the Oiris Apshutim. Blima. From that's what he's proven from Achlifu Duchtayu. But in the next Perek, he's only going on Chochmah. And he's showing you that Lagabe the Kli, how much the Oiris Poshet. Ad Kedei Kach, that Lagabe the Kli, the Oir would be considered Lamayla Mitam. But we have to say there's Chochmah there. And that's why when the oil does land in the Moicha Chochmah, the Chochmah reveals, the Kli reveals the Chochmah that's in the oil. So what you're saying is that all the oil is together, all the same thing. There is such a Nakuda. We're going to get to that actually more when we go all the way up and to Sheva, in the further Maamar. Yeah, because he's going up slowly. The Vayla was still talking about Tzilis. In the next Maamar, we're going to go higher.
From the beer and you give not necessarily so upgrade, because the whole idea that the Canaan bring out the seer, you could say that the earth is all person everything.
Therefore,
you could say that the earth really wouldn't be so problematic to say that the earth has all the seer in it.
No, we're saying there's 10 oiris. There's 10 oiris and they're all together in the Oir HaKav. Or in this case in Keser. There's 10 oiris there. And they're pshitas legabe the kli. And each kli draws out what's negir to him. Al derech, like the neshama. The neshama is pshitis legabe the guf. When he lands inside the guf schleps out whatever he wants. By chachach will schlep out the oira chachma.
So the Michoel of Gimel was only the gas for Zagnosis then, and not the gas Ara Chachma, Ara Chesed.
So again?
Then so you're saying that the Michoel of Gimel would only like the Maskana would only apply to as Zagnosis when we're talking about Sfar Sarav, as opposed to in Perek Yudalad where he starts talking about Ara Chachma individually, as opposed to as general Sfar, this Kilo.
I'm not saying necessarily it's going necessary Zagnosis. The Vayla was still talking much lower than necessary Zagnosis.
I'm saying according to the Maskana and how we understand this sphere is about them individually being pushed, even though you have Ara Chesed and Ara Gvur individually. So Achlev Tuchtayu is beyond that already, because we're talking about a general sphere that includes both together. Not going to get Ara Chesed, Ara Gvur individually, that are still pushed up the Gav the Kli.
I'm not sure we have to go up to Zagnosis for Achlev Tuchtayu. Achlev Tuchtayu can happen. The way it sounds over here from Keser down to Atzilus would be fine. We're talking.
Well, Keser, but I'm saying the idea of, like he says, remember that Keser is al derech that's
yeah.
We're not going to get Ara Chachma, Ara Chesed individually. Talking about is one general svara, so that not going to get the gabe each svara like this svara, related to each svara as an arb before the kli. Ara Chesed Kishal Atzma isn't what when we talk about Chlifu Duchtayu. It's that it would talk about a general sfar that's switching from place to place, as opposed to being understood in Chesed, it can be understood in Gvura. But it's the same one sfar. Mm-hmm. When we talk about Ara Chesed individually as opposed to Ara Gvura, that's something else. And that's what Perek Yudalad is talking about.
Okay, so that's what I said before. Perek Yudalad is talking about individually, but We'll have
Perikei Gimel isn't talking about Ara Chesed individually. Before it's established in the Kli, but individually. It's talking about beyond that, Kesed.
Okay, but it was only brought as a moshel to show the pshitus. So we're not talking about the hisarvus that he talks about later on in the Hemshech of the mixing of the spheres.
That's about Seichel, not about Chesed Gvura.
Yeah, we're not talking about this arvus at the moment. Yeah, it was just a heichacha. It was bringing a heichacha for the pshitus. Before it lands inside, it must be poshut.
But not that this muscle is what it is when you get
Right. I think. Right. So in Perek Yudaled, he talks about again the same idea that beforehand it was pshitus, and when it comes into the kli, it becomes a tzio. But here he goes much more bedakus, because after the oil comes into the kli of chachma. So we said before, when the oil comes into the svara of Shammai, when it comes in the Kli HaGvura, it becomes Gvura. It's a tzir of Gvura. Is that it? That is now the oil and oil HaGvura, and it's Kulei Gvura? And what's the yachas of the Kli to the oil now? Would we call the oil now also Lima? That it doesn't have its seal. There's a line over here at the end of Perek Yudaled, where he says, it's a long brackets, but in the end of Perek Yudaled he says, so it's not mamish the end of that brackets he says, Umuvan. The line begins with Al Kain on page Lamed Aleph. He says, Umuvan, the inyan be'ein areich da hakli, the gabe ha'oir, hu habe yoser me'ein areich da ha'oir ha'mislabish ba'akli, the gabe shoshu Michoel. See that? The kli is more ein areich legabe, the oil that's inside him, more than the oil is legabe beforehand. We said before, when the oil is in chachmas timor, we're talking about chachma now. When the oil is in chachmas timor, is legabe chachma, that's called bli tam. Shtoit kachala b'machshava, don't ask questions. It's l'mayli mechachma. When it comes down, it becomes chachma. So it becomes a tzir of chachma. So you'd say, okay, this is the ein areich of atzilus legabe l'mayli. I say, this is the ein areich. And now the oil that's in the chachma is now being misnabish in the kli. They're on the same level. So what does he say? He says no. He says the ein areich of the kli legabe the oil is more than the ein areich of the oil hamislabish legabe the oil the way it was in chachmas timor. Why is that? So he says the b'ha'oil hamislabish harimashu hu begeder inyan asogas hakli harizirak mitzad haislabshus. See, he's going backwards and forwards. It's only mitzad the hislapshus that it becomes the tzir of chachma. V'zois gufi b'avodens in brackets zois gufu lefi shegam b'shoshu b'chinas chachma. Yeah, we allowed him to go into the tzir of chachma, but why does he have now the tzir of chachma, the tzir of the kli? Only mitzad the hislapshus. Avol be'etzem iyin ha'asoga shel ha'oil u'kemoi ha'asoga b'shoshu Michoel. He still retains his relationship with chachmas timor. The inyan ein areich ha'kli legab ha'oil u'shu be'etzem in ha'asoga. It's already a different mahus. That means even when the oil did come down, he's saying now it's an oil mitsuya. We mustn't forget that even when the oil comes into the kli and becomes the tzir of the kli, and we're saying it's taka change, not like mayim, it's taka like it's an oil gvura, oil chochma. Nevertheless, at the same time, it's still only oil, and it's still shaykhs to chachmas timor to the mayim, to pshitus, because the whole tzir was mitzad the kli. What would that be in the moshel? If we go back to the moshel, when we were talking about the moshel of the neshama in the guf, we said that even when the keiches are mislabish in the guf, the keiches are still moshel v'shelet. Although they're mislabish, but who's in charge? Remember, we said that if the Nefesh Bahamas takes over, there's a problem over here, right? So we say no, but the Moyach Shal Taralev, the Keichas HaSheret of the Yivorim, they always remain Keichas HaNefesh. Even when they're Melubish in the Guf, they don't become Guf, they still remain Oir. So there's a few things going on over here at the same time. First, the Rebbe Nishma wants to say that there's Pshitas and Tzia at the same time, Lamayla Minakli, Lamayla Meislapshus. The Oir is Pshitus, and that's why there could be a chlifa duchtayu, and that's why the gabe chachma we say it's shtei kala b'machshav, it's lamayla mitzil, So it's pshitas. On the other hand, there is chesed in gevura behelim. There is tzia behelim over there. So it's not mamish pshitas. And then we're saying the same thing when it comes down and it's mislabish in the kli. You have both things. On the one hand, it takes on the tzia of the kli. At the same time, we're saying, but it's not completely meshubah to the kli. It remains attached to the oir shalamaylim in the kli. Therefore, it's not mamish be'ein areich.
Which means that when we say shtei kachalav machshava, it's only because the keli can't understand, but the eir be'etzem would understand.
Or even if you're going to say it's mitzad the oir, it's mitzad that the oir is now inside the kli.
But then
Because
he is
in other words,
be'ein
it's a
areich.
situation where they can't understand it. Not mitzad be'etzem. Be'etzem he is shaychus to higher.
Which means the eir could understand, the keli can't, and that's why.
But now that it's in the kli can't understand. Just like when the neshama is in the
Because
goof.
it's megashim, the eir, whatever.
Just like when the oil is, when the neshama is in the goof, then the neshama now understands ruchnis be'etzem. No, be'etzem, yeah, but at lepoil, what does he understand? Only gashmis. Okay, so that's really the end of the biu on that the oilers have a tzio. They don't have a tzio. Where starts the tzio? But where are we going? That oilers have a tzio, even though it's behelim, but it goes higher than atzilus. There's already a tzio. But then in Perek Tezvov, now we're creaking a bit how. Now we're going back to Ein Sof. And here you see mentioned the two shittas in Ein Sof itself. What are the Esespheres Hagnuzes? You have to remember now there's two shittas. If you hold that the Oiris are pshutim, then where are the Esespheres Hagnuzes?
Ak.
Huh?
Ak.
Shimu. Lifnei Atzimtzum. The Esespheres Hagnuzes in Ein Sof.
We say it's about Ak also.
What's that?
It says about Ak also. In Samachlos somewhere.
Oh,
Here he
talking
did.
here. No, if you want to know the chlolos, where the Esespheres Hagnuzes, there's many different madregas. The rule is, Esespheres Hagluyas is Atzilus. Because what does gluyas mean? It's golui, it means it's oiris bekelim. So Esespheres of Shemalubish and the Kelim Atzilus, they're called Esespheres Hagluyas. Anything higher than that could be called gnuzes. So Esespheres of Arechampim would be called gnuzes, of Atik would be called gnuzes, of Akudim would be called gnuzes, and the same thing Ak. But when we talk about Stam, at least in this Hemshech, when we talk gnuzes, we mean gnanos in Ein Sof. So we're going all the way to the highest mocker of Esespheres, which is unless he gives you a different address, otherwise, yeah, that's what we're thinking. So it's in. Let's go back to the mashal for a second. So what would that be in Nefesh Ha'odam Esespheres Hagnuzes? Be the koiches haklulim b'ha'etzem. But we're talking about koiches. We're not talking about higher than koiches. We're not talking about etzem noisa koiches. Remember the first Maamar? There's etzem noisa koiches, and there's koiches haklulim b'ha'etzem. Klulim b'ha'etzem is not the etzem mamish. Remember we spoke about that. You can talk about the koiches the way they're calling the etzem, or you're talking about the etzem which is noisa the koiches. Depends where you're starting from. If you're starting from koiches, you say there are koiches, and I'm tracing all the way back into the etzem. It's like I'm tracing the roots of this tree all the way back into the ground. So I see roots in the ground. I see roots for the spheres in Ein Sof. I see roots for the koiches in Etzem HaNefesh. Those are called koiches haklulim be'etzem. When I say etzem noisa koiches, I'm talking about where there's no roots for anything. I'm talking about the ground before there's any roots inside. There's the etzem, which is noisa, whatever koiches we know that come out from it later on. But at the moment, I'm talking about an etzem echad poshut. So when we're talking about koiches haklulim, we do have koiches, but they're kolul. So we're in this stage, we're doing that now to Ein Sof. The koiches are the Esespheres, and they are gonus in Ein Sof. And this is where he starts to differentiate in Ein Sof two levels. There's the level of Ein Sof where you can say the Esespheres are gonus over there. That would be like the koiches haklulim b'ha'etzem. And then there's a madrig in Ein Sof, which is mamayla mizeh, where there's no Esespheres kolul there. Right? So let's go back again to the Esespheres Hagnuzes. So how are we going to name this? Give it an address so we should remember what we're talking about. The madrega of Esespheres Hagnuzes are sometimes referred to as the oil of Aleis Haratzen. Also here he calls it that. Sometimes it's referred to as the Oir HaShayach El HaOlamas. Why is it Shayach to Olamas? It's not Be'erach to Olamas, but it's Shayach to Olamas. Why is it Shayach? Because it's an Oir where the Inyonim of Olamas are Ola B'machshava, Ola B'ritzoynai. He's thinking about Olamas, so he's Shayach to Olamas. Lifnei Alei Saratzen, in the Oir that's Lamaylim Alei Saratzen, he's not thinking of Olamas. So it's not a mocker for anything to do with Olamas. If anything, what Oir could come out? What could come out from the Oir which is Lamayla Mishayachas La'olamas, which is Kedem Alei Saratzen?
There's Oir before the Spheres Agnosis.
Of course.
Spheres and cats.
Right, so what would come out? What does
Spheres aren't Spheres Agnosis.
In Oir and Sof now we're learning, in this period, in period Tesvav and onwards, we're learning that in Oir and Sof there's two levels. There's the Oir where there could be the Esses Spheres Agnosis, and there's a higher Oir where there's no mocker for Esses Spheres Agnosis. This Madrega is called Alei Saratzen because all of B'ritzoynai Esses Spheres and they became the Esses Spheres. Those are the Esses Spheres Agnosis.
And there's only Esa?
There's only Esa. And then there's Kedem Alei Saratzen, there's no Spheres. Or, as he says later, there are Spheres which are called Ein Kate Spheres.
Are those Esa in there as well?
Well, if there's Ein Kate, it includes Esa, right? Chal Masai Mana. But there's no Esa as in a Hagdorah of Esa because it's Pshitas. Oir and Sof are Pashut. We'll get to that in a second, but that's a Kedem Alei Saratzen. But over here, there's Alei Saratzen. So in Alei Saratzen, he wants Esses of the Esses Spheres Agnosis. What are these Esses Spheres Agnosis? Oiris or Kelim? What are they? We're talking about an Oir and Sof, so L'chayra, there's Esses Spheres, there's Esa Oiris. So he said, it depends according to whom. If you hold according to the other Shitta, that Oiris don't have a Tzir, not the Shitta that we're dealing with, well, let's do the Shitta now of the powders for a moment. What does the powders hold? That the mayim in the kli remains mayim pshutim. It's just you look at the keli from the outside, you see a red oil because you're looking from the kli's point of view. But what's really inside there is oil pashut. So according to that shitta, the oiris are pshutim, and the tzir is only mitzad the kli, right? Not the shitta that we're holding in this hemshech. So if you take that back to oil and sof, so what are the esses filis agnusus? If oil was pashut in atzilus, then it's all. Then alachas kavlakam in oir and sof. The oiris are pshutim. So where the essa spheres in oir and sof, there cannot be essa oiris in oir and sof because the oiris lachatchila is really one big oir that just spins itself up into different glasses, into different spheres. Understand what I'm saying?
So it will be Kalim, which is Rishimo.
So therefore, where are the essa spheres agnuzas according to the Shittas HaPalas is in the Rishimo, which is what we said earlier on. I think in Periches that the Rishimo is the mocker of the Chayes Hakli. And all the shemas, Kail, Elikim, Shin, Daladun, all these shemas are all from the Rishima. That's the chayes that the Rishima gives to the Kalim. Because the Rishima is the Mokkah HaKalim. So the Esses Agnuzas are in Kalim. This he says clearly in Perik Tezvov. Look, the third line in Perik Tezvov, he says, V'hapadas kosav she'esses Agnuzas hem shorshe HaKalim. If you say the oiris don't have a tzil, then there's no oiris. You can't have a shirish for oiris if the oiris don't have anything to show. They have no tzil. So the esses spheres agnusas according to the padas is esses spheres in the rishimu. Mashenk in the oir is pshitas. But what are we doing in this Hemshech? We're not doing that shitta. We're saying that the oiris had a tzil. That was the whole arichas, right? So the oirs have a tzil, even though lagabe the kli it's pshitas, but there is a shtikul tzil. So then, if that's the case, I can trace the tzil back all the way to oir and sof lifnei tzimtzum, and the esses spheres agnuzas are essa oiris. What about essa kelim? Mistama b'kol shekelim. There's essa kelim. They're not really kelim. It's only the rishima. The rishima is the koyach of making kelim, but it's bedugmas kelim. So you have oiris and kelim in the essa spheres. So you have, according to this shitta, essa oiris and essa kelim.
When he said in Perek Ches, he was going according to he was bringing that out also to the shitta we're going with, or he was only mentioning it?
Which part of it? What
you mentioned before that
the shemus?
Yeah.
No, the shemus. Everybody agrees. The shemus is in kelim.
So it's just only according to the shitta.
What's
of
the
Titus
definition
that is the
only the kelim and no. There's no
shemus is referring to that.
No. Esses spheres agnuzas is definitely referring to the kelim. The shaila is it also referring to the oiris? In this Hemshech, we want to go with the shitta that the esses spheres are also in oil. So also the esses spheres agnuzas have oil.
What's the time it's in the air?
What's that?
If we're saying it's in the air, it has to be also in the Kalim separately?
Yeah, because Kalim and Oiris is two different
But it
inyanim.
would come from the same place.
No. This is Oiris, this is
Nay,
Kalim.
I mean that the same one who makes the Chesed Agnuzis in the Eres, it's going to be in the Kalim, like the Agdara in the Kaya.
No. There's two different Masechtas. Masechtas Kalim, Masechtas Oiris. Don't mix the two Masechtas up. There's two different things. We're talking about in the Oir, and in the Oir
What
there's
makes
all
the
sorts of...
Eser?
What makes it Eser? Olabrit Soinei. Or as he says later, the Lashon, Shir ba'atzme b'koyach, the Eser Sfiris Agnusis.
And that's both the Eres and the Kalim.
Yeah.
At least we're explaining.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, obviously. Now here, so we're coming here to a Nakuda, which we're gonna. There's nowhere else to go to look for a Shirish. We've come to the final Shirish in Oir and Sof of these Eser Sfiris, which we say have its seer. We've come to the Shirish Harishan. That's Olabrit Soine Eser Sfiris and the Eser Sfiris Agnuzis in Oiris and of course in Kalim, but also in Oiris. So we have now in Oir and Sof, we have a mixture of what's going on. We have Oir and Sof Bechlolus, where there's no Eser Sfiris. Oir and Sof Atzmai doesn't have to have Sfiris. And then there's a Darg in Oir and Sof where he wants Eser. Right? Are these are two different madrigas. That's how he explains it over here, right? It's two different madrigas. So it comes out very interestingly that you have, when we say Oir and Sof Lifnei HaTzimtzum, it's not just Oir and Sof Lifnei HaTzimtzum. There's Oir and Sof and also an Oir which is not in Sof. Because these Eser Sfiris Hagnuzas of Oiris are really an Oir Hagvul. So it's mamish like we were saying before in the Moshel. You have the Etzem HaNefesh, and inside there's Koiches HaKlulim. The Koiches are Bligvul? No, Koiches are Mugbolim. The Etzem HaNefesh is an Etzem, which will, in terms of Nefesh HaOdam, would be called Bligvul, and the Koiches are Koiches Mugbolim. Like if you remember, when he translated Pnimim Be'etzem, he said, there wasn't mean Pnimim Be'etzem, Mugbolim Be'etzem. So the Koiches Mugbolim, these Koiches Mugbolim are kolol inside the Etzem. What is the matziv of the koiches when they're kolol in the etzem? At that point, since they are kolol in the etzem, they would be called also bligvul, but not because be'etzem they're bligvul. It's because at that point they are kolol in something higher than them. Al derech bin yonenu.
What makes it higher than Rishim? Rishim was exactly the same thing. It's the etzem bligvul. It's kafel bligvul. The mind it's called the etzem.
The Rishima is always bligvul. The Rishima is a Koyach Ein Sof. The Rishima is definitely a Koyach Ein Sof. The Kalim that come out from the Rishima are Gvul. There I don't have to look for Gvul HaKolol B'Bli Gvul. I'm not looking for Gvul HaKolol B'Bli Gvul. It's a big difference. The Koyach to make Gvul is a Koyach Bilti Mugba called the Rishima. That's a Koyach Ein Sof. The thing, what does this Koyach do? He makes Kalim. Does that mean the Rishima is Gvul? It's a Koyach HaGvul. It's a Koyach Ein Sof. To make Gvulim. So when you come to the Kalim, I don't have to say the Kalim were kolol in. I never said the Kalim were kolol in himself. Fakert, I'm saying schachus from the Rishima. We said the whole time that the whole harvest of Kalim was b'derech richuk in all ways, in all levels. So the Rishima to the Kalim could be Yeshmiah, and I have no problem with that. Hagamit says also that it's really Gila Hel Megam the Rishima, but that's not Hazar. But the Kalim from the Rishima could be a schachus, and I don't have to look for Kalim Aklulim in Oir Sof. But I don't have to look for. It's a koyach hagvul. But Oiris, we're saying, are not eis chachas. We're saying that the Oiris can trace themselves back. They themselves, the tzii of chochma, chesed, and gvura, and all these things, I can trace themselves back, not just before Atzilas, I can go back to Keser, all the way up to Oir and Sof. That means I have 10 inyonim, 10 siyurim in Oir and Sof, somehow. Here's already a shtickle problem. You just said that they're Eser and they're Gvul, they have a Geda, a Tziyur, and they're kolol in Oir and Sof. So when they're kolol in Oir and Sof, are they Gvul or are they Bligvul? So I'm saying it's the same thing as Koiches, Aklulim Be'etzem. They're Mugbolim Be'etzem, that means if you ask them what they are, they'll tell you they're Mugbol. But the way they stand at the moment, kolol in the Etzem, they're Bligvul. Do you remember that Nakuda from the first Maamar? So I say it's a Hemshech, got to keep on going back to the... Look page Ches on this Tfus. That would be page Vov on yours. If you have page Vov. Page Ches at the top of the page, about 4 lines from the top after the bracket. He says, Omnom, hakoiches k'moshe hein klulim benefesh, harihem gamkim bebechinas gvul, ve'enam b'metzias koiches, bli gvul, sorry, ve'enam b'metzias koiches klal, k'yudua, the koich ha'seichel ha'yuli yatzmi ha'kolul be'etzem ha'nefesh, enam b'chinas sichli klal klal, v'chem b'shar ha'koiches. Ach ha'rosom, shenimshech l'slabish b'ivor ha'guf, hari ze bo b'chinas tzimtzum, etc. Ve'al yedei ze hein bo'im b'hagbola. So, on the one hand, we'd say they're mugbolim be'etzem. Look at the kitzah. V'ha'ikahu ki ga'koiches hem pnimi mehaynim mugbolim be'etzem. V'ha'nefesh hi bilti mugbeles. Keileles b'seicha koiches mugbolim. Rak b'hiskalusim b'ha'etzem hem bilti mugbolim. V'hiskalos ha'arosim ha'etzem ha'nefesh, and then they become mugbolim. So you see, what's the meaning now of mugbolim be'etzem? Mugbolim be'etzem means what they are. If you ask them personally what they are, they'll tell you, we're mugbal. I'm Chochmah, he's Chesed, this one's Gvura, this one's... Everybody's a different Inyan, so it's Mugbolim be'etzem. But when they stand kolol in the etzem, there they stand as believable. What would be the klal that we could put on this? There's a klal we have in Chassidus. Kol ha-kolol bo-ha'etzem, harehu kamei ha'etzem. When something's kolol and something higher, at that time, he takes on the Maimad HaMatzav of the Kolol. The Kolol takes the Maimad HaMatzav of the Kolol. What's that? What's that? Anything that you have, when it's Kolol in the Etzem, or in its Mocker, it takes on the din of its Mocker.
Anyway.
So, for example, when Oyer is Kolol in Moer, it's got a din of Moer. By the way, in Halacha you have such a thing as well. You don't get it there? You have such a thing, for example, if you have, what do you call it, these bugs in vegetables, right? They grow inside the vegetables. Once they step foot outside of the vegetable, then you can't eat it anymore. And if it then climbs back in, you really got to wash it away. But before it became its own entity, when it was kolol in the etzem, it's got a din of a vegetable. You can eat it. Problem is, we don't know which bugs were in there to begin with and which ones came out afterwards. But if we knew that this bug grew within the thing on it's part of the peri, it's part of the vegetable. The same thing you have in Hilchos Shabbos, have such a thing. There's bones inside fish, right? Why do we have gefilte fish on Shabbos? Why gefilte fish? Actually, was talking about another stick of fish. I'm stuck gefilte fish. The reason is because you don't do boira. You don't do boira. There's bones here and there. But there's certain times when the chelik of the bones are considered, before you separate them, they're part of the fish. They're not considered, not always is it considered by I have to work out exactly how long the Maisa when, but there's certain times when it's not considered boira, it's a shtickle fish. It's not a separate thing. And so certain times you have when something is called there, so for example, Uba Yerech Imoy. It's got a din of, it's a sniff of the mother. It's not a separate being. When he's born, it becomes a separate being, a whole different din. But before he's born, is Yerech Imoy, is a chelik of the mother. Midas haklulim b'meichin. Are they meichin or are they midas? Midas haklulim b'meichin is meichin. It's a spirus ha-meichin. It's a tnuah of midas within the meichin, but it's in the head. It's not in the heart. Midas, when they come down to the heart, that's already midas is a separate thing. Anything when it's kol in its mocker has a din of the mocker. When the oil is kol in the moer, it has a din of a moer. So in our case, when the koiches, even though they're mugbolim be'etzem, but when they're kol in the etzem ha-nefesh, they have a din of bligvul, because they're kol in the etzem. Al derech ze be'inyanenu, when the oiris are kol and gnuzis in oir and sof, they have a din of oir and sof. To a certain extent. That doesn't mean be'etzem they're not esespheres. At that point they lose their, so to speak, their self-hagbola, their self-identity as esor nyan mugbolim. Nevertheless, be'etzem they are mugbul, be'etzem they are pnimium, and we will see in the next Maamar how the Rebbe Nishva is going to be mechadish, it's l'chayr a big chiddush, which even the Baal Man and the Kovetz couldn't find a mocker. I asked him actually, well, where's the mocker for this? Does this have a mocker? It seems like it's a chiddush of Ayin Beis. This next Maamar about the mocker, the spheres in Ayin Sof, and what the Rebbe was saying writes over here, that the symptom is different, agabe, this shayrish of spheres. It's a big chiddush. We know the Simcha, how the Simcha works, Siluk, and then Hamshach HaZakav. The Rishon makes us, we'll get into that, it's not so simple. But at the moment, what we have to get clear is the Eshes Sfiras HaGnuzas have their Sherish and Oren Sof, and at that point they're Bligvul, they're part of the Oren Sof, they are a sniff of Oren Sof, but Be'etzem there's something else. If you just extract them from there, you will see that they are Oris Mugbolim. Now, the Sof of the Maamar, I can't get to the whole thing, but the Sof of the Maamar, you'll see in Perek Yud Zayin, he brings down a Maamar which occasionally comes down in the Chassidus, this Maamar of Shishim Hema Malachis Ksav Yad Harabzal. This is where the Alter Rebbe was Mechadish, the Inyan of Spheris Ein Kates. In other words, we're differentiating two Madregas in Oren Sof. What we're just talking now about the Keichas HaKlulim Be'etzem, which is the Eshes Spheris HaKlulim Ben Oren Sof, that's only the last Madrega of Oren Sof. There is a higher Madrega in Oren Sof, which is called L'mayla Me'alei Saratzen, and there's no Spheris HaGnuzas. There it's Oren Sof HaBligvul, with a full Bligvul, no kolol, anything else inside it, just Oren Sof. That would be a mocker. If anything would come out of that in Seder Shtalshus, it would be save of Kolalmi, not Mamala Kolalmi. This Eshes Agnuzes is going to end up being Mamala Kolalmi. That's what it is. Eshes Firis is Mamala Kolalmi. But the higher oil is going to be a mocker of save Kolalmi because it's Bligvul. It's not Shaykhas to Oilemus. It's not made for Oilemus. So it's Bligvul. It's a mocker of Seviv. This Oren Sof, there's no Spheres. Yet nevertheless, the Alter Rebbe said that you could say there's Spheres there, but how many Spheres? Spheres Ein Kates. Spheres Ein Kates doesn't mean that there's 1, 2, 3 up until Ein Kates. It means that, as the abuse of the Lashon Kahai Butzino brings from Idra Zuta, look next to the beginning of Chav Zayin, of your Chav Zayin, and in the middle of page Lamed Hey, it brings down from the Idra Zuta that Kahai Butzino dispashed the Chol Stav Ve'iver. That it's like a candle that shines on all sides. And if you want to know what's going on over there, you'll find that it's only Bitsino Bil Chayder, there's only one light. In other words, it's mispashut all over the place, but really it's only one oil. What does that mean to say? We say Spheris in case doesn't mean this Hischalkus, Bligvul Hischalkus. We mean that since it's Bligvul, since it's an oil ha-mispashut, Bligvul, how many different ways could Bligvul express itself? Bligvul ways. Bligvul expressions is called Spheris. So it's Spheris Ein Kates. So we have two levels in Oren Sof, which he says also in the previous period, that's Havaya, the first Havaya and the second Havaya, that's those two levels in Oren, the same two levels, and he'll get back to the higher level, but we're going to continue the next Maamar in the main part which we're talking about till now, which is the Eshes Sfiras HaGnuzas, which is the Mocker of the Mamal Kolalmi. Just Lahoya, I was thinking one time, this is Tam al Derech Adrush al Kaparim, where's this Lashon Spheris Ein Kates come from? Why not say Spheris Bligvul? That's the usual Lashon. Why Spheris Ein Kates? But Al Pi, what it says later on in the Hemshech, he says where do the word Spheris come from? He compares it to a few different Taichin, a few different Pirushim, and one of them is Lashon Sefer, Svarim. Well, there's a pasuk in Kehelis which says Aseis Svarim Ein Kates. There's another word in between. Ad Ein Kates maybe. Aseis Svarim Ein Kates. Aseis Svarim Ein Kates. So you see the Lashon Svarim Ein Kates is Lashon Neufel al Lashon Ulay Yeshleima, that's where the Lashon Spheris Ein Kates come from.